Hi all, today I want to share with you my favourite method for adding texture and atmosphere to music through randomization with Logic X. What do I mean by that? Well, let's take a listen to these chords I've written, first without any atmosphere added, and then again with the randomized atmosphere that I've created. First, here are the chords. And again with the atmosphere added on top. So we are far from a finished piece of music here, but I think the difference between the atmosphere version and the no atmosphere version is night and day. By just adding a few simple tracks of reverb soak notation, you can achieve not just more depth in terms of sound design, but also in terms of the overall interest and excitement. What's even better is that this effect is pretty easy to implement, and there are two ways which we can do it. I'll cover both in this tutorial, as they each have their own pros and cons, which we will discuss as we go. So the first method is achieved using Logic's Midi effects. If we switch to the mixer window, you can access the Midi effects in the area just above the software instrument box. What I'll do is we'll start one of these atmospheres again from scratch so you can see exactly how it's done. I'm just going to create a new MIDI region here, and I'm going to draw in a single note. If we play this back, what we're hearing there is actually a single note. It does sound like it's more than one note because I have got some pitch correction plugins in use on the channel strip itself. For this tutorial though, I won't actually be covering any of the sound design in detail as it's not really anything special. The key sound design element to take away from this is that everything should be washed in reverb if, like me, you want atmosphere. So there's nothing revolutionary to really be discussed over here in the channel strip itself. Anyway, now we have our MIDI region, it's time to start manipulating this. Remember that all the MIDI effects do is alter MIDI information, not audio. This is why they are placed at the top of the channel strip, above even the sound source itself. In this case, we're using a Logic synth, I think it's Sculpture, yeah. The first effect then, the arpeggiator, performs a simple function of splitting single MIDI notes up into continually repeated notes. In this case, I'm setting the trigger rate to be 1/4 notes. And so far we have this. And that's all we need to do with the arpeggiator. Next up is the randomizer effect. We start by setting the randomizer to affect the note number. In other words, the note on our piano roll. I'm leaving all of the parameters as they were, and the result is each MIDI note now coming in is assigned a new value at random before being sent on to the next part of our chain. Because the arpeggiator is triggering a new MIDI note on every quarter beat, we now hear a random note on every quarter beat instead of just a series of Cs. Finally then, I employ the transposer MIDI effect to alter the value of the MIDI notes yet again. I know that the chords I have conform to the key of G sharp natural minor, and so I set the transposer to match this. What the transposer then does is observes every incoming note and shifts the notes that are out of key so that they now sit within the key of G sharp minor. can't hear much of a difference there without any backing chords or other bits of music. It just sounds like a random jumble of notes. But believe me, if you play without the transposer, the random notes do start to clash with the music that you've got sitting underneath this. So if we play it all together now, you'll hear what this new atmosphere layer sounds like with the backing chords in as well. Sorted. Everything is in tune, and we have a subtle yet important layer of ambience which is already adding so much to these chords. Now, while this is great for creating atmosphere, what about melody? The downside to this technique is that it is completely random by nature, and that means that if you hear a section you like, there isn't any way of easily recalling it for use later on, say for instance, in starting a melody or an arpeggio. This next alternative method is a little tricky to set up, but it does address that exact problem. Okay, so here we have a different layer of the atmosphere using the Logic utility instrument, the Klopfgeist. As you can see with this one, the MIDI region is actually populated to reflect its random nature. To show you how I got this with minimal effort, I'll duplicate the track and start from scratch. The first thing we need to do is draw in some MIDI notes. So I'm drawing one long note and then splitting it so that there's an individual note hit on every quarter note, just as it was with the arpeggiator on the previous example. This is what we have so far. The next step then is to select all of the MIDI notes in this region. So for that, I'm going to use Command A, and then to go up to the Functions drop-down menu and to MIDI Transform. And in there, we're looking to get to Random Pitch, Velocity, and Length. Within this menu, we can create our own presets up here in the top left. So I'm going to go ahead and just come down to Create New Transform Set. We can rename this to suit our purpose. So for this, I'll just put Random Melody. And then clicking outside of that, and it's saved as Random Melody. What we then have in front of us are a number of columns, each one representing a different characteristic of the MIDI notes, and beneath that we have the options to modulate these or to transform them. The four that we're going to look at here though are position, pitch, velocity, and length. So starting with position, I'm going to come down and make sure that plus minus random is selected, and I'm going to punch in here a few values. So I'm going to punch a 1, and we'll go for a random number, 26, something like that. The next column we're looking at though is the pitch column. In here, we're going to make sure that the random is selected, and we're looking here to create a range which spans the entire length of the piano roll. So starting down at C2 all the way up to G8, and that will give us then the ability to have the MIDI notes spread out across the entire roll. We've then got velocity. Now, depending on the instrument you're using, velocity may or may not matter. For the synth I've got, it is going to be sensitive to different velocity values, so I will use some values in here. I'll bump the range up to 85, and 50 as the bottom end is fine for this. The last thing then is the length. I'm going to leave that as it is as well. It's on random, and you want to again put a range in that you feel happy with. So I've gone for 160 and 040. Totally up to you. I encourage you guys to experiment with that. It will change depending on what it is you're actually trying to achieve, but for me that's absolutely fine. Finally then, we just click select and operate, and you should see the MIDI notes have now been dispersed throughout the piano roll, seemingly at random. If we play this back, you get quite an ominous set of notes, partly due to the instrument that I'm using. The key here though now is that we don't have notes that are conforming to the key that we want, and so to replace that final step of the transposer MIDI effect plugin, what we need to do is select all of the MIDI notes that are in this region, so again using Command A, and then you come down here to scale quantize. I've set mine up to G sharp natural minor already. You can change yours depending on the key you're in and the variation that you're looking for, and just click the Q button and you should see notes move to conform to the new key. Once that's done, if we play that back with the chords, everything should be in key and sounding okay. Okay, as I said, the main advantage with this is that although the creation of this region was largely random, what we do have is the ability to recall sections that we like the sound of. So for example, let's say for argument's sake that I listen to this section here, and I felt that these notes would make the good starting point for either a melody or maybe an arpeggiator, then because they're right here and they're accessible and they're set in stone, I can simply copy them, paste them into a new region and start editing away. The previous example, where we rely on the MIDI insert effects, doesn't allow for that because it is truly random, it's ever changing. You're never going to get the same repetition twice, or at least it's very unlikely that you'll get the same repetition twice. So there isn't really any option for going back and editing later on. If you're looking for an endless, randomly generated piece of music, maybe for a menu, sort of game audio type thing, then that might be the way to go. It's very straightforward, very simple. I'd say that if it's more of a musical application though, where you're writing a piece of music and you want to have a bit more control, this MIDI transform option is probably the better option for you. And that's it, guys. If you have any questions or comments, please just pop them down below. I would appreciate a like on the video if you did, enjoy this. I will be doing more videos in the future, particularly centered around ambient music. I've had a few requests to sort of go into detail around creating ambient music and different methodologies, so I will be covering that more in the future. For now, though, if you're interested in this, I do also have a video about randomizing glitch percussion over on my channel, so I'll leave a link to that down below. And there's also some free samples that come along with that video as well. So if you're interested, you can go to my website and check those out. All the links for the actual downloads are in that video's description as well. So yeah, head over there and have a look and let me know what you think. For now though, go make some music, enjoy, and I'll see you in the next video. Thanks for watching.